The morning sun slips through the curtains, painting soft gold on the walls. Margaret opens her eyes slowly, her body heavy with the quiet weight of age. She sits up, feeling the pull in her shoulders, the tightness in her legs. Every morning begins the same way, a small battle between stiffness and motion. She once believed this was just how life after 60 was meant to be. Slow steps, careful movements, and the quiet sigh of surrender. But today feels different, like her body is whispering something new. A memory stirs, of her physiotherapist's gentle words about stretching. "It's not about pushing," he said, "it's about listening." Margaret remembers that sentence as she places her feet on the floor. The wood feels cool under her skin, grounding her in the moment. She inhales deeply, her lungs filling with fresh morning air. The idea of moving again, really moving, sends a spark through her chest. Not for youth, not for vanity, but for recovery, for life itself. She closes her eyes and begins the first small stretch of her day. The tension eases slowly, like ice melting under spring sun. And for the first time in years, she feels not old, but alive. Margaret remembers the first morning she truly noticed how her body had changed. It was a quiet Sunday, and the world outside felt still and calm. She tried to reach for her coffee mug, but her shoulder resisted, stiff and heavy. Her knees ached as she stood, and a sharp pull ran down her back. It wasn't pain exactly, just a reminder that things were no longer the same. Years of movement had slowed into caution, and strength had turned into memory. She used to dance in her kitchen, stirring soup with a gentle sway of her hips. Now she moved carefully, guarding every step like it might break her balance. It was strange how time could take away energy without her even noticing. Until one day, she looked in the mirror and saw not just wrinkles but weariness. She wondered if this was what getting older truly meant, becoming smaller each year. Her daughter once suggested yoga, but Margaret laughed it off. She said her body had retired long before she did. But deep down, there was a longing, a wish to feel free inside her skin again. That longing stayed with her, quietly waiting beneath the routines of daily life. One afternoon, her old friend Helen came by with a bright smile. Helen was 64, but she walked with a lightness that seemed impossible. When Margaret asked her secret, Helen chuckled softly and said, "Stretching, my dear." Margaret raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Stretching, it sounded too simple to change anything. Helen laughed again and told her about the slow movements, the deep breaths, the patience. "It's not about bending far," she said. "It's about reminding your body it's still yours." That sentence stayed in Margaret's mind long after Helen left. She couldn't stop thinking about it as she folded laundry, as she watched the sunset. Her body still hers, what a strange and beautiful thought. That night she stood by her bed, hesitant and curious. She placed her hands on her thighs, leaned forward just a little. Her back stretched, her breath deepened, and something inside her softened. The next morning she tried again, moving slower, noticing the rhythm of her body. Every stretch felt like waking up a forgotten part of herself. It wasn't easy. The stiffness was stubborn, and sometimes her balance wavered. But there was a quiet joy in simply trying, in feeling her muscles respond. She began to understand that recovery wasn't about speed. It was about kindness, about giving herself time to move without judgment. Each small motion became a message to her body: "I still care, I'm still here." Her mornings slowly changed. The stiffness remained, but it no longer felt like defeat. It became a conversation, one stretch, one breath, one moment at a time. And in that gentle beginning, Margaret found something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the soft, steady one that grows quietly inside. It whispered through her muscles, through her bones, through her heart. A promise that even after 60, healing was still possible. that her body, though slower now, still remembered how to live. The first day of her new routine arrived with a mix of curiosity and fear. Margaret rolled out the old yoga mat her daughter had given her years ago. It still smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. She stood in front of it, unsure where to begin. Her mind whispered doubts, small but persistent. What if she hurt herself? What if she looked foolish even alone? But beneath the worry, something deeper pushed her forward. A quiet determination, born from all the mornings she had felt helpless. She took a breath, steady and full, and lifted her arms slowly above her head. The movement felt foreign, awkward, as if her body had forgotten the language. Her shoulders trembled, her spine resisted, but she stayed there, breathing. The air moved through her chest like a soft wave, calming her hesitation. She lowered her arms gently and began again, this time slower. Her fingertips brushed the air, her knees bent slightly, her balance uncertain. Each motion revealed something, tightness, fatigue, but also hidden strength. She remembered Helen's voice, light and encouraging. "Don't fight your body, dear, listen to it." So she listened. She listened to the soft cracks in her joints, to the pull of her calves. She listened to her heart beating, steady, reminding her she was alive. The stretch was simple: reach, breathe, release. But in that simplicity, she found something almost sacred. It wasn't about bending perfectly or moving fast. It was about being present, patient, kind. After 15 minutes she stopped, her breath slightly uneven but calm. Her arms felt lighter, her legs less rigid. And inside there was a small spark, a whisper of energy she hadn't felt in years. The next morning she returned to the mat. This time she added gentle neck rolls, slow shoulder circles, soft bends. The stiffness met her again, stubborn but familiar. She didn't fight it, she greeted it like an old friend. The tension began to loosen, not all at once but piece by piece. With every stretch she felt her body responding, learning to trust again. Some days she felt tired halfway through and rested early. Other days she surprised herself, flowing from one motion to another with ease. She began to understand that progress wasn't a straight line. It was a slow dance between patience and effort. Her mornings transformed from silent struggle to mindful ritual. The mat became her quiet sanctuary, a space of peace and reflection. Each breath carried away a little doubt, each stretch built a little courage. She no longer feared the tremble of her muscles or the creak of her joints. Those sounds were proof of movement, of life, of recovery in motion. And as she ended each session, she stood still for a moment, hands at her heart. She whispered gratitude, not for what she'd lost, but for what she was regaining. A sense of belonging inside her own skin. A new relationship with her body, gentle, forgiving, alive. For the first time in years, she wasn't just existing. She was moving, breathing, and becoming herself again. Weeks passed, and Margaret began to notice the quiet changes unfolding in her body. Her mornings no longer started with groans or hesitation. Instead, they began with breath, movement, and a soft smile. The stiffness that once clung to her spine began to release its grip. Her arms rose higher, her legs bent deeper, her posture stood taller. Every stretch told her a new story about what her body could still do. She realized recovery wasn't a miracle that happened overnight. It was a slow conversation between time and patience. Her body wasn't fighting her anymore, it was cooperating. She began to walk differently, lighter, steadier. When she climbed the stairs, she didn't hold the rail as tightly. Even her breathing changed. It flowed easier, fuller, calmer. Each inhale carried strength, and each exhale carried release. The mirror reflected someone different now, not younger but stronger. Her movements had purpose, and her face held peace instead of fatigue. Sometimes she caught herself humming while stretching. It felt like music her body had been waiting years to hear. One morning, she decided to take her mat to the garden. The grass was damp, the air cool, the birds singing in gentle rhythm. As she reached toward the sky, she felt completely connected. The sunlight warmed her hands, and she smiled without reason. This was not just exercise, it was communion, a quiet exchange between her and the world around her. The wind touched her face as if in encouragement. Her body responded like it understood the language of nature again. Stretch by stretch, she was learning how to live inside herself. Her balance improved, her steps felt secure, her confidence returned. She could feel strength building from deep within, not in power but in control. She realized that every part of her body had been waiting for this attention. The muscles weren't weak, they were just forgotten. And now, remembered, they moved with new gratitude. Some days she still felt sore, her joints whispering their age. But instead of frustration, she met it with patience. She learned that even discomfort could be a sign of growth. Each day became a small victory, a morning of healing, an evening of calm. Her stretching became more than routine, it became reflection. It reminded her how much of life was about returning. Returning to movement, to breath, to the body she once ignored. And as she moved, she felt her heart open too. Old fears loosened, replaced by quiet confidence. She no longer measured progress in inches or minutes. She measured it in moments of ease, moments of peace. Every stretch felt like a thank you to her body, to her persistence, to life. And when she finally stood still at the end of each session, she felt something pure. A stillness that wasn't emptiness but fulfillment. For Margaret, recovery was no longer just physical. It was becoming a gentle art of remembering who she was. The more Margaret stretched, the more she realized it wasn't just her muscles healing. It was something deeper, quieter, almost hidden beneath the skin. Every time she reached, every time she breathed, her heart seemed to loosen too. The tension she carried for years began to drift away like dust in sunlight. She used to think her aches came only from age and time. But now she saw they also came from fear, fear of slowing down, of losing control, fear of watching her body change in ways she couldn't command. Through each gentle movement, she started forgiving herself for that fear. Her stretches turned into small moments of truth. When she leaned forward and held the pose, memories surfaced. The years of rushing through life, of ignoring the body that carried her. The days she pushed pain aside, pretending strength meant silence. But strength, she realized now, was softer than she ever imagined. It wasn't in the push, but in the pause. It was in the breath between effort and acceptance. Some mornings she would stretch beside the window, watching the world wake up. The sun would rise slowly, touching her face with quiet warmth. In that golden light, she didn't feel old. She felt timeless, part of something that kept moving, endlessly alive. Her stretches became prayers, not spoken but felt. Each motion whispered gratitude for what her body still could do. And when her muscles trembled, she didn't scold them anymore. She smiled, knowing trembling meant growth, meant living. One day, after finishing her session, she sat in stillness. The silence around her was full, humming softly like the air before a song. Tears welled up, uninvited but welcome. Not from sadness, but from release. It was as if all the years of self-doubt were leaving her, one breath at a time. Stretching had become her way of speaking to herself with kindness. Her way of saying, "You are still here and that is enough." She began noticing small things she had missed before. The way her heart slowed after each deep exhale. The gentle rhythm of her pulse syncing with her movements. Even her sleep improved, her dreams lighter, her mornings calmer. She was no longer chasing her old self, she was meeting her new one. Each day she learned to listen to the quiet messages her body sent. Sometimes it asked for movement, sometimes for rest. And she listened without guilt, without comparison. Her body was teaching her a new kind of wisdom, that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about honoring it and choosing peace anyway. When she looked in the mirror now, she no longer searched for what was lost. She saw what had been found, a woman learning to move through life with grace, a heart that stretched wider than her arms ever could. And for the first time, Margaret felt completely whole. Months passed, and Margaret's mornings became a ritual she could not live without. What began as slow movements on an old mat had turned into a way of life. Each stretch felt like a note in a quiet song she played for herself. She no longer thought of recovery as a goal, but as a rhythm. Her body, once fragile and uncertain, now moved with steady confidence. Her steps were sure, her balance graceful, her breath calm. Neighbors began to notice the change in her. Her posture was taller, her eyes brighter, her smile easier. At the community center, she joined a small group for seniors' wellness. They moved together in slow harmony, laughter mixing with the sound of breathing. One morning, the instructor asked her to lead a few stretches. Margaret hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to guide others. But then she remembered Helen's words, "It's not about perfection, it's about presence." So she stood in front of the group, her heart both nervous and full. She lifted her arms, breathed in and began. Her voice trembled at first, then found its calm rhythm. "Move slowly," she said. "Listen to what your body tells you." The room fell into gentle motion, every stretch a shared conversation. Some faces were tense, some curious, but all were willing to try. Margaret watched them, seeing her old self reflected in their hesitation. And when one woman smiled mid-stretch, Margaret felt a surge of warmth. It wasn't pride, it was connection. The realization that healing grows stronger when shared. After the session, several women stayed behind to thank her. One of them said, "You make it look peaceful, not painful." Margaret laughed softly and replied, "That's the secret. It's not about pushing, it's about breathing." They all nodded, as if she had said something sacred. Over time, she began teaching short morning classes twice a week. Her voice grew more confident, her movements smoother, her patience endless. She spoke not just of stretching, but of gratitude and balance, of learning to meet each day with openness instead of resistance. The classes became a small community of encouragement and laughter. People came not only for the physical relief, but for the calm they carried home. Margaret found joy in every lesson, every slow exhale, every trembling arm. She no longer feared aging. She embraced it like an old friend. She realized that strength wasn't measured by what she could lift. It was in how gently she could carry herself through each moment. Each stretch she taught was a reminder, to her students and to herself, that healing never stops, it only changes shape with time. When the sessions ended, she often stayed behind a few minutes longer. Sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, the afternoon sun warming her face. In that quiet glow, she would whisper a thank you. For her body, for her journey, and for the gift of sharing it. Because in helping others stretch toward healing, she had stretched her own heart wider too. Margaret often thought about how far she had come since that first hesitant stretch. The woman who once feared her own stiffness now moved with calm assurance. Her mornings had become sacred, her stretches a kind of quiet prayer. Each breath was a reminder that she was still growing, still capable, still alive. But more than her body, it was her mind that had truly changed. She no longer chased youth or strength as she once did. She now sought balance, between effort and ease, between motion and stillness. She had learned to listen deeply, not only to her muscles but to her heart. It told her when to move, when to rest, when to simply be. And she obeyed gently, without judgment or guilt. There were days when her knees ached more than usual, days when she skipped a stretch and simply sat by the window instead. But she didn't call those days failures anymore. She called them pauses, moments of respect for her body's wisdom. In her stillness, she found as much healing as in her movement. Her routine was no longer something she did, it was part of who she was. She often smiled thinking how strange it was that stretching had taught her life. Patience, gratitude, forgiveness, all hidden inside simple motions. The rhythm of reaching, holding, and releasing became her quiet mantra. Her breathing synced with the sound of the world around her. The rustle of leaves, the hum of distant life, the slow heartbeat of time itself. Sometimes she wondered if this was what peace truly felt like. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of understanding. One morning, as dawn painted gold across her floor, she stood still. Her arms reached outward, palms open, heart lifted to the light. She felt her strength not in tension, but in surrender. Her breath deepened, her spine lengthened, her chest expanded. It was as if she was rooted to the earth and floating at once. In that moment, she understood something profound. Her body was no longer her burden, it was her companion. It had carried her through joy, through loss, through years of forgetting and remembering. And now it moved with her in harmony, in trust, in quiet love. She thought of all the people she had met through her practice. The laughter, the shared aches, the gentle encouragements exchanged like gifts. Healing, she realized, was never meant to be done alone. It was a shared rhythm, a human connection through movement and empathy. Every stretch she took was linked to every other who had ever tried. All of them reaching not for perfection, but for peace. When she finished her final pose, she stayed still, breathing softly. The morning sun warmed her face, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Not of sadness, but of gratitude, for time, for breath, for being. Margaret smiled, her heart full in light. She whispered into the silence, "I am still here." And in that moment, she knew recovery had never been about returning. It had always been about becoming whole. The morning light filters through the window, soft and golden on Margaret's face. She stands tall, her body calm, her breath deep and steady. Each movement flows like water, slow and deliberate, full of grace. Her stretches are no longer practice, they are poetry. The years behind her no longer weigh her down. They rise with her, woven into every breath she takes. Outside, the world hums quietly, alive and familiar. Inside, her heart beats with peace she once thought she'd lost. She no longer fights time, she moves with it side by side. Her body speaks and she listens, gently, fully, without fear. When she lifts her arms toward the sky, it's not for strength. It's for gratitude, for every ache, every tremble, every recovery. For the chance to begin again, even after 60. As she exhales, her smile softens into something eternal. A quiet truth settles in her heart like light on water. Healing was never about youth. It was about presence, patience, and love. And as the day begins, Margaret whispers to herself, "I am still moving, I am still becoming."